I haven't necessarily woken up during my career and said, I intentionally am going to pivot. I think it's been more for me taking advantage of opportunities as they present themselves.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Growth. I am your host, Imran Mia. Today, our guest is Corby Fine, a digital transformation thought leader, digital ninja, and a CX guru. Corby is also the host of Fine Tune with Corby Fine podcast. Corby, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks a lot. I'm often the interviewer, so it's fun to be the interviewee for once in a while.
Wonderful, wonderful. We're looking forward to the conversation. I want to start off by just slightly giving our audience, the viewers, a little bit of an intro of yourself. So I understand your career spans over 2 decades in senior roles at some of the largest organizations in Canada. Maybe can you provide a bit of an overview of your career over the last 2 decades?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a unique opportunity to really experience the workforce from a number of perspectives. One, I started off early in software development, coding, system implementation. So I've been on the more hands-on technical roles. I've also spent some time in the agency world, really thinking about, as a service provider, how are you helping organizations go to market best with marketing and digital campaigns, thinking about customer acquisition, retention, loyalty, et cetera, but from a third-party perspective. And then I've had the chance to work in 3 of the country's largest brands, telecommunications companies, and 1 financial services organization, really leading I guess I would say, to your point, digital transformation, both from the perspective of the platforms, the tools, the technologies that enable a better, more agile work capability, but also from the way in which you engage directly with the consumers around customer experience, both self-serve digital, as well as enabling the channels that are human-assisted. How do you make those more efficient, faster, simpler for the employees? Because I think often we think digital transformation equals customer self-serve, but just as much, you have to think about the employee base as well.
100%. Lately, we've been hearing a lot about not just the customer experience, but also the employee experience, because if you have a happy employee, you have a happy customer. So I think your point is very relevant. I wanted to just maybe talk a little bit about, why do companies need to go digital? But before we get into that, let me ask you another question. What do you see in the Canadian marketplace around growth and digital?
Yeah, the Canadian marketplace for the last, let's say, decade, I think there's been a lot of attempts at, I would say, digital transformation from the outside in to start, meaning thinking about those customer touch points, channel executions, e-commerce implementations, trying to find ways to get the last mile done a heck of a lot quicker, faster, more efficiently. Over the last number of years, you've seen, I would say, the catch up on the core platforms and systems. So thinking about your GL, your billing systems, your fulfillment systems, your supply chain, logistics, the areas that are, well, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of perspective, you're now starting to see the capital shift from, okay, the channels are pretty good. Like, we've got great CMS, we've got great personalization, we've got great use of data, we can optimize buy flows. But what are we doing about enabling the call center agent with more valuable information to streamline and simplify the contact? What are we doing to make sure that the device or the package gets out of the warehouse and to the customer in 50% of the time than it did before? That's where I'm starting to see more of the focus, the inner workings infrastructure of the organization.
Right. So that leads into my next question, as I alluded to previously, as to why companies need to go digital. There's a number of factors, but in your experience, what are the top 3 or 4 things that customers think about when they think digital?
Listen, I'm a simple kind of person. So to me, every organization tries to do three things, or should try and do three things: make more money, find ways to do it more efficiently and cut costs, and make people happy along the way, both the employees and the customers and the partners, whoever's involved in the ecosystem. I think historically, there were often trade-offs that said, if you want to sell more stuff, don't worry about the efficiency of doing it. You might have to do some heavy lifting, back office processing, because the more volume I put through a system, the system can't handle the capacity anymore. Therefore, we'll hire an outsource, BPO engine, and we'll offshore the work, and we'll swivel chair. I think that's changed. So when I think about why you want to go through a digital transformation, it's to actually be able to encapsulate all three of those outcomes in one fell swoop. So a more automated online e-commerce buy flow that acquires a customer, stores the record, allows them to place the order, goes to the fulfillment engine, does the QA check, automates the shipping, packing, proof of delivery, loop back. You can sell more, do it faster, and make people happy because they have less touch points. Right?
Yeah.
That's a great example of just end-to-end ecosystem.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it sounds simple, but you being at some of the largest companies in Canada, having probably delivered major transformational projects, how important is the strategy piece when organizations think about going digital? Do they need to start with figuring out the strategy first, or there's other components that they think about first?
I've seen business cases for over $100 million in capital investment that were done literally to the point of, we believe we'll see these kinds of aggregate outcomes. And I've seen business cases for a $250,000 project that had 7 pages of bottoms up and top down, qualified financial benefit. I think every organization's got their own opinion. I think there's a bit of an inevitability answer in all this, which is there's an inevitability that you kind of now know that if you're not streamlining your operations and you're actually creating efficiencies, you will fall behind in your ability to do things. Example, if you're a bank and you want to launch a new GIC product in market, if your systems are legacy and it's going to take 6 weeks for the IT team and the product team and the finance team to go into the GL, to manually create the data files, to test the process, to launch it to your channels, to deploy it, as opposed to a modern GL bank infrastructure in the cloud that literally a business user, can flip a few toggles, launch a clone of the 3-month GIC, make it a 6-month GIC, change an interest rate, pass it to a QA team who in an hour can qualify it and launch it within 48 hours. You've got a competitive disadvantage. So I do think that there's an inevitability that you need to get there. I think the business casing is the problem. When it comes to strategy, I don't know that an organization that hasn't gone through these projects knows how to qualify and quantify it. And that's where bringing in third parties, bringing in experts, bringing in consultants, or hiring people in-house that have done it elsewhere really is required to help understand what are the potential benefits by doing this.
Yeah, 100%. I think you touched upon a few key elements of it. Of course, the business benefits that you described earlier on are very clear. Increase revenue, find efficiencies, and make customers happy. Sometimes there may be, depending on which industry you're in, there may be compliancy or regulatory, drivers as well. But in terms of just going back to the strategy piece, you talked about partners, and then there's the team aspect. How do you build a team? And when I say team, in the early days, people used to think, okay, it's the IT folks that do everything. But in today's world, you and I both know that it's not just the IT folks. You have to have the business people and IT people working alongside each other in order to be able to deliver successful transformational projects. And then there's the tools and the tech stack. So when determining the strategy and the fastest time to market, how do you determine what's the right mix, in terms of putting the team together, getting the tool set, the tech stack, and the partners?
Yeah, I think everybody has to have their role as an expert. So, the business having, let's say, a product owner who can understand what are those user stories that the end consumer, customer, user of the system, platform, or ecosystem is going to have to experience. That then needs to be essentially translated by a qualified IT partner who can truly understand how we're going to make this come to life. And then from an architecture perspective, think about at an enterprise architecture level, are we doing the translation of those requirements into something that's going to be short-term lived? Or is that something that we're thinking about foundationally is going to be the core platform for the future of this business? And what else can I do if I'm building for a particular use case to then ensure that I'm future-proofing the reuse of that for other types of ecosystem transactions, channels, et cetera? So I think it's a shared ecosystem. I do think the notion of team for a large-scale project, though, does need dedicated focus. So the business needs to not just consider it a side project. I got to operate my stuff day to day. And oh, by the way, I'm spending $5 million on this project on the side. I do believe you get better results when you've got a team that people know they're dedicated to for the duration, from the strategy design through the user stories, through the estimation, through the wireframing, through the interface design, the UX, UI, while the IT team's figuring out how to make this thing come to life with the right platform. Without dedication, I think you lose focus and things go awry.
100%. I think the buy-in has to be at all level. And I've seen many projects go sideways, like after people have spent millions of dollars and then in the end, there's nothing to really show to the
I've seen projects go backwards, let alone sideways.
Backwards as well. Speaking of challenges, one of the things that comes to my mind is in terms of like when you execute, you go through your design, your discovery, your design, your development, testing, and everything. You roll it out, but then there's something missing, right? I've seen projects where everything's been done, the product's getting rolled out, but then it gets shut down because they didn't think about the risks involved, for example, the fraud that might happen. You're shifting your sales to an online channel and you're not really thinking about omni-channel experience, right? So what are some of the challenges that you've seen in your experience?
So one of the things that I find interesting is when a deployment or development team, let's call it your IT partner, takes a requirement as so literal and doesn't have their own creative flair or assessment capability to read it like a person, not read it like a machine. And I'll give you an example. So I've been involved in a project that was literally called, the title of the project was called Automate the Buy Flow. Doesn't matter where, doesn't matter when, doesn't matter who. Now, a person would read that project and say, we're going to automate a buy flow. Awesome. Well, architecturally, the IT team, what they did was rather than automate the legacy old school manual buy flow, they just built a new automated buy flow. Okay. No problem with that. That's a architectural IT decision. But there was never a requirement explicit from the business that said, shut down the old buy flow, because the project was all done under the assumption of automate the buy flow, which,
Right.
a human would interpret as, well, if you're going to automate it, there's no more manual. However, they built the automated buy flow and put both into the production ecosystem. And in monitoring the analytics for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks of going live, my team's like, well, how come we're not seeing the volume of flow through? Like, what's happening? And the conversation went to, well, you didn't tell us you had to shut down the old one. And so that's a really simple, low-risk problem that just was some efficiency loss. And we fixed it and we had a conversation. But when you start to talk about things like a lack of understanding of the impact of, if I'm going to shift a whole bunch of terrestrial, in-your-face, human-assisted transactions to a self-serve automated with high risk of fraud, high risk of fake payment, fake KYC, kind of know your customer capabilities, you really need to think through the downstream impact. It sounds all glossy and shiny when you think about cost efficiencies and self-serve adoption and the benefits of that. But there are inherent costs and risks to all of these things. People will try and fraud you out in an online channel way more than they will elsewhere. It's fact in any business. And so again, coming back to your question of when you assemble the project team, do you have someone from legal? Do you have someone from risk? Do you have someone from inventory management, warehousing, fraud protection? All of these things, even though they may only play a tiny role in the project, you need to cover your bases early and upfront. High risk. So sometimes, again, as I said on my example, just interpretation of a requirement can go so awry. And on the other hand, to your point, sometimes you don't even think about things like risk mitigation. That can be disastrous downstream.
100%. And I think what you're saying is that people should adopt the shift left strategy, meaning, when you're talking about strategy, when you're discussing strategy and you engage business and IT and you start the discovery and design process, that's when you start to engage the QA teams, for example, the legal teams. Everybody should be included in those conversations right up front so that you can minimize the risks associated with that might come down the road.
Exactly. If you don't have the people that know what questions to even ask at the beginning, it's too late by the time you get to the end of the project.
Yeah. Yeah. The other challenge that I come across, and I'm sure you'll agree, is the conversion of when you implement a browse buy strategy. A lot of people come browse, but then you can't really convert them. And the second part of my comment is the ones that are converted, how do you track those and how do they sort of get measured back into the organization? So that's another challenge that I've come across.
So I think a lot of the first point has to do with what is it that you're selling? And do you as a business, irrespective of the channel, have the trust of the consumer? And the simple example there is, let's say there's 3 industries that I always say are, well, let me give you the 3 industries: buying a car, getting a mortgage, and signing up for a telco service plan. The thing that all 3 of those experiences and industries have in common, in my opinion, is that the price point on the website is the entry point of negotiation. And so if you've built a channel to allow for a very simple, here's the price, do you want it or not kind of an experience, you're going to get a lot of window shopping, you're going to get a lot of price comparison, and you're going to get a lot of bounce with the call-in or the retail visit to then conclude the deal, because the expectation is a negotiation. If you're buying a widget, the price is the price. So I think, one, you've got to really understand and set the expectations based on your business model. If you're in a business model of variable pricing, it's going to be that much harder to build that experience, to get the trust of the consumer. And I literally have used the example of, are you willing to put a yellow Post-it on the homepage that says, trust us, this is by far the best price. And if you don't believe me, pick up the phone, call 1-800 whatever, talk to John, and John's going to tell you, I can't beat the price. That is policy. That is procedure. That is corporate governance. Are you willing to put the best price online? And if you're not, don't expect conversion, but think about it to your second point as, how do you create an attribution model that says, if those people were browsing but not buying, did that browsing experience simplify the channel touch point downstream and lower the cost? Meaning, did you, one, educate that consumer enough so that when they did do the inbound, you had a lower handle time, a lower retail visit time, and a higher conversion because they were self-educated? Or 2, did you empower the agent with that much more information to personalize the experience and, again, get the same outcomes of higher conversion and lower time? So I think, don't expect everybody to buy, but for those that aren't going to buy, what can you do to use the information from that interaction and create an attribution and data pass-through into the other channels to simplify and shorten the experience?
Right. That's absolutely correct. And once you're through the buy flow and the customer has bought it, now how do you move them away from the call center onto your self-serve platform? And what are some of the strategies to keep them engaged, and how do you increase the adoption? Those are some of the other challenges that I've come across.
Yeah, digital engagement and adoption. One, set a realistic target. Like, don't think that because your business has an app and a logged in space that someone's going to come every third day to, just for fun, log in. Are you a transactional business? Are you a bank where my money flow is in and out on a daily basis, where my payroll comes in, where I'm paying bills, where I kind of need to know the status of my life? Or are you an airline where once, twice, 3 times a year, I'm using your app ecosystem in my profile to book a flight, get a trip to, somewhere over the Christmas holiday, and check my Aeroplan or whatever it might be, my loyalty points every once in a while? Very different expectations. An FI as a primary bank, if I'm first in wallet, I might expect you to log in once every week, once every 2 weeks, maybe your payroll schedule, maybe your high payment to, your taxes, your whatever it might be. But if I'm an airline, don't expect me to have the same cadence of engagement. So I think one is understand your business, understand the touch points, and make a realistic target. In terms of stimulating it, it's a value exchange. Like, to me, there's two reasons people go to the app. They get value or they don't trust you. If they don't trust you, they're logging in to go, did they double charge me? Did they mess up my bill? Did I use something or excess that I shouldn't have over my service plan? That's not a good reason to engage. And so I'd be very careful of that. The real value is I'm giving you valuable information that you can do something with. Like, hey, we've noticed that you've overspent in a certain category, and just a flag, it means next month you're going to have a little less to save and you might want to, change your behavior. Thank you very much. We love being your partner. Or, hey, your car's fuel efficiency is down a little bit and the app notifies you to log in. So those are experiences of value. And the best example I give all the time is I'm more than happy as a consumer to let the big G, Google, track my location and understand my calendar, because what they do for me is that at 3:30 on a Thursday, they send me a notification that said, hey, you might want to pack up from the office and leave a little early because otherwise you're going to miss your kid's soccer game because there's a really bad accident on the highway. That's a reason to engage. That's a reason to create loyalty. And that's a reason for me as a consumer to be willing to give you more of my data in that joint partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's another one that you might agree with when we talk about, for example, healthcare or wellness, right? That is something when you start to engage and adopt, you want to go back because it's about your health, it's about your wellness. I feel like maybe once the trust is established there, that you might have more engagement at that level.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big cyclist and I'm a huge user of Strava as a social connection and an app ecosystem for, other cyclists. And the other piece that I really get out of that is, and it ties to the other question as well around adoption and engagement, is the notion of gamification. I do think some industries are in a better position to actually structure some sort of gamification to stimulate more of that adoption and engagement. If you can make it fun, entertaining, and valuable for me, I might come back. And so in a Strava world, to your point around fitness, it's either me versus myself and consistent improvement, or it's me versus my peers, or me versus an anonymous world of people that are my age and my fitness and my height on my bike. I want to know how I'm comparing. But in a business world, sure. I mean, if you're a telco carrier, wouldn't it be interesting to kind of know the kind of shows you watch in comparison to people and families that look like yours, or, the places in the world that you've called in the last 12 months, or the number of connections that we've helped you make socially? Like, there's a lot of things that you can gamify to create that stimulating behavior as well.
I'm always asking my friends and family for recommendations for a Netflix series or something, right? Like, if that is something that I could get through one of those apps, saying, hey, this is a show, you watch these shows and we recommend a certain type of show, right? So that's another type of social engagement that I could get from. Yeah. Like a big question, and I know this is a huge topic. I wanted to ask, where do you see the world of apps going? Do you see them being around in the next 5 years? Or are we going to see something different altogether?
It's a good question. I'd say one thing that I've noticed, more and more of the daily use experiences that you might use with your smartphone seem to be embedding themselves into the operating system layer of the platform. Example, a year or two ago, if you wanted to scan a QR code, you had to have an app to do it. It's now built into the OS. 3 years ago, if you wanted to know what song was playing in the background at the coffee shop, you had to Shazam it. Now it's built into the OS. You start to see the platform companies maybe taking over a little bit of the interaction capabilities of the day-to-day use of the end user, which is absolutely theoretically disrupting some of the business models. Now, is your bank data ever going to show up in the OS? I'm going to go with probably not. But outside of like health and finance, there's not a lot of stuff that's that sensitive that couldn't necessarily be replaced. I don't think that's going to happen. I do, though, think that the number of apps that you start to determine as mandatory critical sort of feature function use on your device will shrink. You know, I probably have, I could count if we looked. I probably have 60 apps on my phone. I probably use 7 of them. I think that's pretty much in line with the majority of, adults my age. I'm not going to give you my age. I'm older than I think. But my kids, one who's in university, one who's in high school, they use the social apps for communication and entertainment, and that's about it. They don't log into their bank app. They don't care. They get a notification when they do a transaction that's done. They don't log into their email. I don't even think they know their email address. They don't log into their my telco service provider to check their usage. Things just work for that generation.
It's different. I like you said, our generation, we're more voice and data. So, if I want to talk to somebody, I wouldn't hesitate to pick up the phone and call them. But my kids, and probably yours, you can't call them. You want to talk to them, you got to send them a text.
No, not a text. I have to actually, I literally have a Snapchat.
Social.
I have a Snapchat account solely for the purpose of getting my son to respond to me.
Yeah.
And it's actually amazing. It's kind of like text messages for this generation are like the laundry at the bottom of the step for me. I just walk by it. I don't even notice it. My wife yells at me. But they don't get it. Like texts and emails disappear. It's got to be visual, stimulating, real-time, action-oriented. It's this adrenaline rush of like based and image-based communication and video-based communication. So, coming back to the app thing, of course, when they start to pay the bill, they'll pay more attention. But other than those functional utility-based applications that have a real necessity in my day-to-day life and the few entertainment/communication apps, I struggle to see why the App Store has to have a million choices. I don't know who's downloading these things anymore.
I agree. I also have so many apps on my phone, but like you said, I think probably I use my banking app and my telco app and maybe a couple of social media apps. That's pretty much it. And the rest are just sitting there collecting dust, or occupying space on my phone.
Digital dust.
Exactly. I want to shift the focus just a little bit. We were talking about pivoting. In your personal career, I know you've been in the telecom space, banking, and healthcare a little bit. Was there ever a time where you felt the need to pivot in your personal career? You did pivot. You started off with software engineering, but then you obviously went on to become a business leader. So at what point did you think you needed to pivot? And going forward, where do you think the market is?
So my own podcast, my last episode, I was speaking with a organizational psychologist, and I've never had a guest like that before. And we talked about imposter syndrome. And I literally wake up all the time and say, how the heck did I get here? I haven't necessarily woken up during my career and said, I intentionally am going to pivot. I think it's been more for me taking advantage of opportunities as they present themselves. I would say this: everybody's got their unique story. Everybody's their own segment of one. I've coded software. I've run a 1.7 million Canadian consumer digital online bank, and I sold Viagra for a year and a half for Pfizer. So yeah, I've pivoted. I'll say that. I'm probably the only person on the planet that's done those 3 things. But I never had necessarily a wake-up call to make a conscious choice. Now, I will say that I do believe a lot of people in their career do get to one particular pivot decision, which I as well had to go through. And it was a former boss of mine. He was the chief digital officer at a big red telecommunications company in Canada. And he sat me down and he said, you kind of are at this point in your career where you got 2 choices. And it's not so black and white, but one choice is you can be that technical expert in your field. You can be the best, Maps software engineer. You can be the best programmatic advertising executioner. You can be the best creative designer, the best project manager, like whatever it is. And as long as that skill is needed in market, hopefully AI isn't coming to take it, you'll always be in demand. You'll always have a job. You'll have a small hit squad, and that's going to be your bread and butter, and you'll get paid handsomely, trust me. But large organizations don't really know how to title up those people. So you might not get an executive role, but they're going to pay you like it. On the flip side, you've got this, I'm going to give up my technical expertise, but I'm going to be someone who can be put into all kinds of situations to lead and develop and scale and build teams and figure out solutions. Now, you're never going to be the technical expert. So sometimes people are going to look at you and go, I don't really know what you do. But large orgs are always going to find a corner for you to go, we have a problem, a challenge, a thing. We're going to shove you in there. Who do you want to be? And I do believe that while it's not extreme on either end, there does come a point where some people need to decide, I'm going to stay the course on my technical expertise, or I'm going to become more of a, people scale leader, team builder, and more of the soft skills. I've had a bit of the luxury of maintaining a little bit of both. I'd like to say that I've helped a lot of people in their career, evolve. There's a few dozen people at VP and above layers in this market that I would say, I hope would say I had something to do with helping them get there. But at the same time, I've been able to maintain through education, personal knowledge, a little bit of ADHD awareness of everything going on, just keeping abreast of the latest and greatest. So, and I'll just say this, it's a challenge. It is hard to do both. And that's, to me, a pivot question is, do you have to focus on one or the other, or do you have it within yourself to maintain an expertise, but also really build those personal, social, team building, corporate skills to evolve to a higher level?
100%. We are coming up on so I want to just ask you one last question. If you were to give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Oh, become a doctor. No, honestly, I think the one line that I've been trying to live by the last little while, and it took me a long time to get there, is the only certainty in life is uncertainty, right? There are so few things you can control. And every day you wake up, you do not know what's going to happen. And just be okay with that. Control yourself, be kind, do the right thing. Don't hurt people along the way. Karma comes back, and the things that are going to happen are going to happen. And as long as you accept that, it's just very freeing to realize that you can accomplish whatever you want, and the things that are going to happen are going to happen. So that's my one line, is just, the only thing that's inevitable is inevitability, really.
100%. I agree with that. I couldn't have said it any better. I think the only thing that's in our control is the amount of effort that we put into anything, whether it's personal or professional. The rest, you just have to deal with as it comes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us, Corby. It's been a pleasure having you on our podcast. Look forward to connecting with you again. And once again, thank you so much. And everybody listening, take care. We'll be back with another episode of Behind the Growth. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts specializing in designing experiences, building products, and scaling technology. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.